Hey, how you guys doing? During E3, they showed the new Last of Us 2 trailer slash gameplay. I'm going to break down this trailer as well as the gameplay and show you maybe some new features that you might not have noticed the first time, as well as kind of theories on as far as what I think the story is going to be. The last video I did, we were more or less speculating on who the lady was, that I wasn't convinced it was the mother. I think it's more along the lines of Ellie's sister or some relative of Ellie. Or maybe she's not related at all, but I just don't think it's the mother. And unfortunately, I won't be able to speculate anymore on that because she's actually not in this cutscene slash gameplay here. But right from the very start, they're having this party in Jackson. During another part of this interview that we'll cut to later with Neil Druckmann on The Last of Us, he kind of says during an IGN interview that what her life is like at Jackson. So what I think takes place here is obviously they're just having their celebration, but I don't think that it has anything to do with the revenge of the last one of the lady possibly getting hurt or her trying to enact revenge for her mother that she never knew, which again wouldn't make sense. I think what ends up happening is the Seraphites, which are the cult members, end up attacking Jackson, and in the process, either it's at this party or shortly after this party, and a lot of the people end up dying, possibly the children that I see there, possibly Dina and Jesse as well, which the characters that they'll introduce, a little bit later. But I think that's probably what propels her to enact this revenge, and we'll go over that as time goes on. But again, I want you guys to pay attention to here what she's wearing. Just keep that in the back of your mind for a little bit later. She's wearing a button-up long-sleeve shirt. Just keep that in the back of your mind. All right, then it's going to cut to the interview they had with IGN.
So last night we were introduced to Jesse and Dina. Who are they, and what kind of a role do they play in Ellie's life?
So they're all part of this, like everyone in Jackson has a role. These three characters, how they contribute to the community. They go on these patrols outside of town to make sure there are no infected coming in, no other marauders. Jesse is kind of the leader of this group, so you hear that Joel's kind of harassing him about making sure he's safe whenever Ellie goes out. And as soon as, I don't know if I'm revealing too much, whatever. As soon as Ellie and Joel settled in Jackson, Ellie and Dina have hit it off. And at the time, Dina was girlfriends with Jesse, but they've been best friends ever since until this night.
Right.
Okay, so that's just kind of setting up how their relationship was and how she molds into the community. And this is where we are first introduced to Jesse.
Hey, don't forget we leave at first light, so get some rest.
Yes, sir.
It's just they're letting you know they're all part of the same patrol group. Now, the reason why I think something happens at Jackson is actually something that Neil Druckmann ends up giving away during an interview. He kind of lets it spoil, and we'll actually show you that part here in a second.
Start with me.
Okay, so tell me more about this community that Ellie is part of. What's her life in Jackson like?
It's kind of normal. She gets to, they go to a festival, they have electricity, you get to have friends, you get to party, they sometimes watch movies, and then bad shit goes down.
Now, one of the things that I love about this scene is if you actually watch the guy in the middle, once he says this, they almost give him a look like, oh, you've said too much. And you can kind of look how the awkward silence it has for a minute, but just pay attention to the guy in the middle's expression.
Is that that's where we're going to end that?
See, he had the full-on awkward, oh, why did you just say that? Shakes his head.
That's where we're going to end that?
So now we know that something happens in Jackson, which is what fuels Ellie to go enact her revenge. Now we're going to cut right into the gameplay, which is kind of like a nice, seamless, bloody transition. Now, what I said a little bit ago where I said I want you to keep in mind what she's wearing and commit that to memory. Here, she's wearing the exact same shirt except her sleeves have been ripped. So I don't know, in the process of, trying to save Dina or Jesse or whatever, maybe she ends up ripping her sleeves off to try to stop blood, or, you know, later on, just for whatever reason, she rips her sleeves off. But I mean, if I would have had to guess, then it couldn't be like to help her move. I think it was more or less for like a bandage process or something. But she's still wearing the exact same outfit, so you know that this takes place shortly after the events in the whole celebration they had in Jackson. All right, so this is the first time we actually get a look at the kind of the HUD they have now. If you notice in the first game, they always had the weapon, whatever item you had was inside of that circle around your health. Now they have this white circle that's in this place. This is actually going to act as your visibility stealth meter. You won't see much of it dip down or anything else, but once she moves to a higher brush area, that's when you'll notice it. They also said during the interviews that the AI and everything is a lot smarter now. So not only do we have new mechanics of Ellie being able to go prone, to jump, and to dodge, but also those AI have those same abilities as well. So you'll see later on her dodging as well as some of the NPCs themselves dodging. But this is kind of the way they communicate with each other with the whistling, and this is how they propagate information. All right, so this is the first chance we actually get to see that stealth meter come into play. If you look down at the bottom right here, you'll notice as she's not in cover and as she gets into higher dense vegetation that she's more or less, that's your stealth meter as far as how visible you are. One of the things I want you guys to pay attention to, and you won't really be able to see much of it now, it's this area right here. We'll be able to see it a little bit later, and I'll actually show you what that says. Again, this is how they communicate with one another. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pause this, and then we'll kind of go frame by frame. You'll notice when we get to this section, that actually says, "May she love you." And so I don't know if this is more or less, as far as the way they phrase this, I'm sure that this is probably the leader of the Seraphites group, and whatever it is, their deity or whatever they look up to, the leader of the cult. But the reason why that phrase will come into play later, you'll also hear it.
They are nested with sin. What is free? No.
Okay, so this is coming back to they are nested with sin, which is what they showed in the last trailer when they had the ladies strung up. If you notice, it's the exact same scenario. It's the same bucket she has to stand on. It's exactly what they do, and I don't know if this is how they purify their victims or whoever that they're trying to do, because they're always gutted. They're always disemboweled the same way. They had it almost happen to the lady in the last trailer, but also the other people that were hung up that were disemboweled, that were hanging. And we also, this is the first chance that we get to see Ellie doing, going prone. So you also notice the stealth meter and how she's visible, how much she's visible now here. And then when she goes prone, it's almost just a small little dot. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and let this play out.
Free. No.
Again, the free them so they might know my love, which is going back to the "May she love you" sign that we saw a minute with the graffiti. Okay, so then I'm just essentially bringing up the scene from the last trailer just to show it's essentially the same speech, whereas she gets cut off before she says the word love. We actually got to hear the love bit now.
They are nested with sin. Free them, that they may know my...
Okay, so now we're going to play this same scene again, but there's a different aspect of this part that I want you to pay attention to. One of the things I've noticed in this trailer, as well as the last trailer, that not only do all the men have the same shaved heads, but all of the women in the cult also have the exact same hairstyles. They always have it kind of the up braided in a bun top, which you'll get to see here in a minute. But one of the things I want you to pay attention to is actually the lady in the back. At first I thought, well, maybe this might have been Yara, but I realized later that, you know, they show that lady and they all have the same haircut, so it's really hard to distinguish who that is. It's just probably a random lady, but then her reaction kind of is a little telling.
They are rusted with sin.
So watch the lady in the back, which I'll highlight for you. See the reaction she has the moment that he's stabbed. Like the other ones, they just look and then they kind of like look down as a way of, I don't know, praying or whatever, but they don't really flinch like she flinches. So I don't know if this is maybe the catalyst that made Yara want to leave the group, or, you know, to get Lev out of the group. We don't know that yet, but the simple fact that she gets kind of turned off by this whole thing and looks away, it's just telling. And then one of the things I cut back to on here is just to show you that not only does Yara have the same haircut, and obviously the guys are all bald, but so does this other lady. They all have the exact same hairstyle and haircut.
Yara! Where is the other apostate?
Okay, this is again the propagation of information. They've probably now stumbled across the body that we just stabbed in the neck at the very beginning of it. And now that this is the way for them to communicate that, hey, somebody's here. Keep your guard up.
Spread out.
All right, this is the first chance we get to see, too, of the weapon select wheel, which now it looks more of a wheel, whereas before it just looked like a plus sign. So corners are more rounded off, but it doesn't look too dissimilar other than the fact that it's up a little bit higher. But also, if you pay attention down here by the stealth meter, whereas the old game, the weapon, whatever that you had, was always displayed right here. Now it just kind of shoots out with what you have. And then when she has a melee item, it'll show down here as well. So if you have a melee item equipped, then it would show you the last weapon that you also have readily available to maybe do a quick switch to. So I just kind of show what this looks like here, and then how different and how similar it is to the 2013 version, which it just seems like it's a little more transparent, it's a little smaller, and it's moved up a little bit more. But other than that, and then we also get to see that this was how they had the stuff set up in the first game with the weapon and everything else, whereas Ellie has her whole new movement abilities that she would move and act differently than Joel, so I kind of like how they've revamped some of these mechanics. Okay, and this is another part that's a fairly interesting and cool little bit. You'll notice that when she has her, obviously the crosshairs are a little different than they were for the bow and arrow before, but you'll also notice this little arrow piece that's down here. The further that she draws back the string, the more condensed and that becomes an actual straight line. But she'll also have these little section lines here, and I wonder if this is just what you can use to gauge how far someone is and, you know, the arrow drop and be able to hit them. But it shows that when she gets back to this point, it's fully drawn out and it's the max velocity or distance it can go. So we now see that the same mechanic that they had in the first one of her almost getting spotted is essentially the same sound effects. Now, based off of this, again, there's no button prompt that has a scale, so I don't know if this is just an intuitive thing, the fact now that there's a jump button, and then you can obviously be more vertical because there's a jump button. So I don't know, like in the last game, there's only certain things you could climb up and vault over and whatever. So I wonder now that we have the jump button, if we can just kind of do this whenever. Get to the top of a car whenever. Okay, now this is the lady here that I wondered if this might have been the lady that was down there. Because right here when she gets ready to get shot with the arrow, you can hear her say, like, no, wait. So, and then I think she's then attacking at that point because she's already been shot, and the other guy's attacking, and it goes from there.
Whoa! Whoa!
There we get to see some of the dodge mechanics. We also have the same thing we had in the last game, where if you notice down here, you have all of the little dots for how long or how many hits you can do with the melee item before it possibly breaks. So the fact that the hammer is buried into the lady's face in the last trailer, and that seems to be the finishing move. I wonder if that's the last thing you get to do with the hammer before it's essentially broken. Without it breaking, like, that's the last move you can do with that hammer, since there's no more hits left. And you'll also notice the stealth meter down here is now pulsating. It's just a little thing to notice that you're... Obviously, people see you and they're chasing you. And again, this is a point where you have to look at the stealth meter again, because we have moments in the interviews and stuff where he said that diving into tall grass obviously won't almost always be your best bet. It just depends on the density of the grass and how tall it is. And obviously, it'll come into play with your stealth meter and as far as how much you're visible.
She went into the grass. Watch yourself.
This is also the first time we get to see that not only does prone have, obviously, the default function, but now you can actually climb up under vehicles. And you'll also notice the stealth meter is now like a small little dot.
Ethan.
What?
Wolf. She came through here. Damn it. Double.
And they also said that now the enemy AI, or the AI in general, now references names, so you can hear them all calling each other by names.
Double back. Go.
And with smarter AI means they'll actually look any place that you can hide, they'll look there. Now this ability here, I'm wondering if, obviously when you're laying prone, that you'll lay out of your side if you're going to aim to your side. I wonder if when you go to aim behind you, if you're going to be laying on your back. That's the only thing I don't know at this point, but it kind of looks like that might be what you could do. Now this isn't anything but a nice little touch, the fact that you actually see the bullet hole in her cheek from getting shot. And obviously we have the meter letting us know now that the guy is behind, now sees Ellie, and he's going to pull her out. So then again, I don't know if this is just part of the animation, because this is the same thing of her laying on her back. This just might be what happens in this particular situation. I think it's just scripted with, you know, when they pin you down, like you have the quick time events of pressing buttons to fight them off. I just don't know if once you fight them off, if that was your ability to be able to lay on your back and draw your weapon.
Ethan!
And referring to them by name. Now, there's a few things I want you to pay attention to at this moment. I'll kind of let it play out, and then I'll back it up a little bit. Okay, so one of the things obviously is that the lady in fact dodges the shot herself, but the other thing to notice is the moment that Ellie is shot with the arrow in her shoulder, you get this icon that appears down here, and you'll actually see as she goes on, this will pulsate. So this will be like a new mechanic they have to where if you're hurt, you'll kind of be able to look down here and see if you left an arrow in you, or I don't know if it's going to take place of other animations as far as like you're bleeding or you know, a gunshot or what have you, but the arrow is a thing that you're actually going to have to get to a safe spot and actually hold R1 to remove it. And I'll show you that as we get to that scene too. This is a nice little movement. This was totally different in the last game. Last game it was a little more of a slow thing that you could do. Now it seems more intuitive and fast-paced. And obviously now you could do it before where you can get somebody in this chokehold and hold them as a human shield, but it also looks like they might have a button that lets you do a quick 180.
I have eyes!
Okay, so this is a section you can see that she's starting to pull the arrow out, and you can see that it's white lines that slowly build up until she removes it. So that seems to be a nice little mechanic they've added as far as your hurt and how visible your wounds and stuff are and how severe. I don't know if that causes a bleeding effect or not. And also with Ellie being smaller now, she can actually fit in tighter spaces. So not only do we have the jump, the prone, the dodge, we also have the ability to kind of get in tighter spaces now. All right, and this is the first time we actually get a good look at the crafting menu. So we could tell right now from the crafting menu that scrap used to be something that you could collect to like upgrade your weapons and stuff later. I don't know if you'll use scrap at this point because it looks like you can also craft a silencer that maybe has a few hits before the silencer breaks. You still have the same melee item. I don't know if these other squares will possibly get filled up with the more skills she might learn. I'm not sure, but we'll be able to fill that up. I would imagine if we couldn't have more skills that we learn, then they would just have built this a little bit differently. So I think we still we'll learn other things as it goes along. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is close to the beginning of the game. But you also get to see that there's still the same blades. There's still the same alcohol, explosives. This is the only thing I don't know because before, if we cut back to what it used to look like, we had the blades, the binding, rags, alcohol, explosives, and sugar. Which obviously it looks like now they've gotten rid of rags, binding, and possibly sugar. I wouldn't imagine this would be, you know, if I had to guess, this is probably some type of cleaning solution. Who knows? It could be a motor oil type of thing that maybe we'll get motor oil and that's how you can make flaming arrows. I'm not sure. But this is our first look at the crafting menu in general. Definitely a lot more brutal fight scenes. Dodge mechanic, fit through tight spaces, close the gap, dodge again. Being able to, and that's one of the things too. Before in the last game, like they would drop ammunition and stuff, but they never really dropped arrows. At least I don't remember them dropping arrows. Like, arrows was something you could find on shelves and whatever, but it was not usually an animation of arrows falling. So now the fact that we can actually pick those up from fallen people is a nice touch. Now this, I was trying to figure out what he's saying, but he just essentially like says this sacrificed lamb for he, and then before he gets a machete halfway through his neck. So I don't think anything that he says is relevant. It's just probably like the last prayer they say before they die. And then we get back to the party. Now, one of the things I want you to pay attention to also, and this is why I think this story plays out. So the very first trailer they ever showed of The Last of Us 2 was Ellie playing the guitar in the room and singing the song. So the way I think how the story kind of pans out is, I mean, obviously I don't know anything about the second trailer with the lady strung up and have the whole, you know, dog and pony show that they did here. But as far as this one goes with the very first trailer, I think that the first trailer is actually after she gets her revenge, at least on a small portion of, like, she attacks all of the people that maybe, or kills all the people that maybe attacked Jackson, but now she's vowing to like get revenge on all of them. And I've spliced that trailer in here as well.
No, I can't walk on the path of the right, 'cause I'm wrong.
And then one of the things, again, to pay attention to, she's wearing the exact same outfit. She still has the torn sleeves. So I think this is kind of after she's killed the people that maybe initially attacked Jackson, and now she's going to go after the entire Seraphite cult members in general. So that's, I think this is kind of towards the end. They probably, if they have this in a cutscene, who knows, they might very well have this. It's kind of a cool little bit. But again, I think this takes place after she's kind of enacted the first stage of her revenge.
What are you doing, kiddo? You really gonna go through with this?
Which, again, this is what makes me believe that obviously Joel, there's nothing that happens to Joel when they initially attack Jackson. I think that she's probably rash and going to get a revenge. She immediately, after maybe tending to a few of the wounded and whatever at the party, she immediately just bolts out to go get revenge on these guys. And Joel ends up tracking where she's at and then finds her here.
I'm gonna find, and I'm gonna kill every last one of them.
All right, so then there we go. Those are my theories as far as what I think the trailer. So obviously there's some new mechanics I noticed while I was kind of scouring over the gameplay, but it's also as far as the story pans out. Hopefully there's some things in there that maybe you didn't notice and didn't realize before. But if you like the video, hit the like button, hit that sub button. It really helps me out. And the next trailer or gameplay they show, I will do another breakdown of that as well. But you guys have a good one. I'll talk to you later. Peace.